The Iowa Hawkeyes doing battle up in Madison against the Wisconsin Badgers this Saturday, perhaps for the West title. I know it's early October. We've been talking about that throughout the week. It is a massive game, massive implications on the line for the Big Ten Conference and specifically the West Division. I'll give you my official preview and my 3 big keys for Iowa to go up north and get a win at Madison. But first, I want to tell you about our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, and how about their Lion's Mane mushroom powder? If you haven't tried it, folks, read about all the benefits of this stuff. Visit goascentnutrition.com, whether you're trying to boost your immune system, just to help your blood sugar, all these different benefits. You can read about these at goascentnutrition.com. And if you use the code Hawkeyes, you'll get 15% off your total order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes at goascentnutrition.com for 15% off your total order. So the Hawkeyes and the Badgers on Fox, 3 p.m. Central Time. Jason Benetti, Brock Heward on the call for Fox. Should be a really well-called game, like both of those guys. And it should be an interesting game in Madison, too, given the fact that, hey, not only is there a good chance that it gets dark late in the game, it's going to be a bit of a night atmosphere late, but you're also going to have a chance of rain in that first half. There's going to be a lot more rain coming through Madison Friday and then into Saturday morning. Will it have stopped by the time we hit kickoff? Maybe. The forecast shows about a 40% chance of rain at 3 p.m. Central Time, according to the Weather Channel at last look in Madison. So how could that affect things? Well, it sounds like once the rain's out, the winds are going to start. And so regardless, it's probably not going to be a real great day to throw the football. Now, could that be a bad thing for Iowa? Well, one wouldn't think so. Iowa's last in the conference in pass offense, so certainly it's not taking away a strength. But here's an interesting stat for you. Wisconsin, for the season, which includes non-conference, they are dead last in pass defense. That would probably surprise you. It surprised me when I saw this stat. But again, for the season as a whole, Wisconsin and their 5 games, they are dead last in the conference. They're giving up 247.4 yards per game through the air. In comparison, Iowa giving up just 193.3 yards per game through the air. So kind of weakness against weakness, maybe. I have a hard time believing Wisconsin's pass defense is that bad. In fact, if you look at conference-only stats, Wisconsin not nearly last in the division. They're about middle of the pack when you look at conference-only stats, their defense against the pass. Obviously, Iowa's going to have problems passing the ball against just about anybody this season, not only being down Cade McNamara, they have problems getting the ball to their receivers. Of course, they're down one of their best players, probably their best player on offense, Luke Lachey. Eric All has been really good. It sounds like we might get Addison Estringa back this week, more likely next week. Kirk Ferentz commenting Wednesday night on his radio show with Gary Dolphin. But the point is, can Iowa take advantage of anything through the air with bad weather and against a pass defense that might be somewhat vulnerable? I wouldn't count on it, folks. And do I expect Iowa to be able to run the ball well against Wisconsin? Well, I'll say this. They better run the ball at least semi-effectively. When I say semi-effectively, like they cannot end up with less than 50 yards on the ground at the end of this game. Well, obviously, that'd be an abysmal total. I don't expect them to get 100. I think if they want a chance in this game to win a low-scoring game, and I can't imagine Iowa winning a game like this with scores over 20, maybe not even scores over 15, as crazy as that sounds. I think if you're Iowa, you've got to be able to run the ball for somewhere between 50 and 100 yards at the minimum. You've obviously got to avoid turnovers, and I talked about this when Iowa went out to Penn State, went out to Happy Valley, had to avoid turnovers. They lost a turnover battle going away in that game, wasn't even close. And of course, rain was a story that day. It could be a story on Saturday as well. So with the wind, with the rain, fumbles, interceptions are going to come into play. That's actually one of my keys. Let's start with my third key first, though. My third key might surprise you. I challenge Brian Ferentz, Kirk Ferentz, and this staff to run an exotic play. In fact, how about let's blow our minds for a second. Run two exotic plays. And no, I'm not talking about a pass to Mason Richmond in the red zone. All right. Got to figure out a way to punch in those red zone opportunities, but run some sort of an exotic, whether it's a flea flicker or a double pass or maybe a throw to your quarterback. I can't imagine Deacon Hill running as a wideout, but the point is do something. And obviously you would think that Brian and his staff have been scheming against this Wisconsin defense. Kirk talked about the challenges that Wisconsin throws at them as a whole, particularly because they're really solid against the run as they always are, but also they've got a new coaching staff in Luke Fickell. They're considered an air raid, but he brings a lot of different flavor from not only the past Wisconsin base that they've had, but also what he did at Cincinnati and his experience at Ohio State as well. You would hope that Iowa could figure out somewhere where maybe Wisconsin's vulnerable to a big pass, especially when you look at those pass defense numbers and say, hey, they might be vulnerable against the pass. Maybe you can get them on some play action or maybe a waist down. Could you believe Iowa running actually a waist down? By the way, ran some numbers. Iowa has had exactly one waist down opportunity in conference play. That's mind-boggling, folks. Mind-boggling. Anyways, I digress. Let's go to my second key. My second big key for Iowa to have a chance to steal one up in Madison, win the turnover battle. And when I say turnover battle, I'm not just talking about offense, defense. I'm also talking special teams, because this series has a history of creating really odd scores, and particularly because of special teams plays. I think of 2018. Iowa had a couple of weird plays in that game. Kyle Groneweg was the punt returner. There was a punt that went off the leg, I believe, of Sean Byer. Groneweg had a ball pop off on a punt return. I think last year Iowa had a muffed punt. It just seems like typically there's a big play or two on special teams that really change the game. If Iowa could get a big punt return by Cooper DeJean or just avoid those big mistakes, they had a couple of them against Penn State on the road, which did them in. Of course, they lost that game 31-0, and they had lots of problems in Happy Valley. But they've got to win the turnover battle / special teams battle. And if they can at least be plus in the plus territory on turnovers, I give them a chance. And how about my number one key? This is pretty simple. Score first. I know it's easier said than done. Score first. All right. Now, am I an advocate for Iowa taking the ball first? Not necessarily, especially if the wind is an issue. I could see Iowa choosing to defer to the second half. But the bottom line is, if they can get points on the board first, they can stay in control of this game. The moment they fall behind, especially against a team like Wisconsin that can run the ball as effectively as they can, and by the way, they're really good in the backfield. I know they're down their second-string running back, Ches Malusi. I was really impressed with sophomore Jackson Aker last week against Rutgers. He runs the ball strong. Obviously, Braylon Allen is a big body, tough to take down. Both those guys are big dudes, and a lot of upside for both of those guys. So Iowa's got to stay in front, or at least stay even with Wisconsin. The moment you allow them to run the ball down your throat because they have the lead and control the clock, I think Iowa is in trouble at that point. Here's a couple of stats. I shared these stats with you the other day on a live show. This is incredible, and courtesy to a good friend of mine who passed these stats along to me. Iowa is the only team in the FBS that is averaging more punt yards than offensive yards per game. Think about that for a second. Isn't that insane? I've never heard of anything like it. Punting average on the year, 288.2 yards per game for Tory Taylor at punter. The Iowa offense, 249.2 yards. Wow, incredible. Obviously, we love Tory Taylor, but those numbers are absolutely absurd. Can Deacon Hill get that throwing motion a little bit under control? I know we talked about this on the live show the other day. I don't feel like he's necessarily got that groove throwing motion that you typically want out of precision passer quarterback. I know he's a former water polo athlete. Maybe that's part of the problem. But, man, he's got a big arm. If they can get some plays down the field, that's part of my call for an exotic. Utilize his big arm potentially. So maybe it's not a pass back to quarterback, but perhaps it's a shot downfield on a trick play. Maybe it's a flea flicker. But that would be good to see. And Drew Stevens is going to come into play in this game as well. I talked during the postgame show on Saturday about his struggles between 40 and 49 yards, specifically between 40 and 45 yards. His numbers are really, really bad going back to high school, and yet he's amazingly good from over 50 and inside of 40. Those things have to be corrected, especially on a wet and windy day up in Madison. So lots to watch, lots to follow on Saturday. Should be a really entertaining contest. Hopefully there's plenty of Hawk fans up in Madison at Camp Randall to cheer on the Hawks. I will be with you live following the game for a special edition of Iowa Postgame. We'll actually have a two-part postgame this weekend. Live with me after the game on Saturday, Iowa Postgame here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. And then on Sunday, Iowa Postgame with Coach Don Patterson. Time TBA, but we'll talk about the game both nights. Hopefully we're talking about a Hawkeye victory. Wouldn't that be good? Don't forget, I'll be giving you my weekly college football picks, including Iowa, Wisconsin, my score prediction on Friday. Stay tuned right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. We'll talk to you then.